Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us, above us only sky. Imagine all the people living life in peace. Woo-hoo.
Hello everyone, welcome to Conversations with SOTU. I'm Josh Schwartzbach.
And I'm Adrienne Metcalf. Josh is a professional medium and he channels the consciousness we call SOTU. SOTU is sourced outside of time and space, so they have a unique perspective on what's going on in the world with all of us, with humanity. And for Josh, this is a very easy process to slip into channeling, and we're about to have a conversation with SOTU. You ready to go?
Sure. Okay, here we go everyone. All right, well. Hello everyone. We are SOTU and we invite you to join us on another journey through the infinite realms of your imagination. We have been speaking to you over the past few weeks about the dynamics of human history from a more emotional viewpoint, to perhaps have you begin to understand that there has been a movement, a growth, an expansion of consciousness within your species that has allowed you to move forward more and more and more with each succeeding generation. This process, as we have often said, is as natural as growth, and really in many ways should be treated in that sort of way, that it is as natural as growth. And so you must also understand that you are involved in the dynamic of being incarnate in a physical body. And it is a very interesting thing about being incarnate. By being incarnate in a physical body, you are, in fact, putting yourselves in the position of reality creators. It is through the choice of being physical that you also begin to take the choice of being responsible for the dynamics of creation. It is so often what so many of your sacred texts call, that you are created in the image of quote-unquote God. And we would say that that is true in a very specific sense, and not just a metaphorical one. That in fact you are the focal point of the energy of the physical and the energy of the non-physical coming together through the dynamics of a consciousness, a physically conscious body, to create the dynamics of your reality.
All right.
So, if that hasn't confused you too much yet, let us continue. All right? You create your reality through your thoughts, your words, and your feelings from your conscious and your subconscious mind. We spoke to you a few weeks ago about the dynamics of how your consciousness is programmed into you in your physical body through your earliest experiences of coming incarnate in the physical body and the challenges that the psyche is faced with when it is suddenly downloaded with all of the information of your mother. And that has a completely innocent consciousness. In that dynamic, there is, a certain dynamic of trauma that comes from that dynamic. Now, we have also said that a very specific and what shall we say, safety type mechanism exists within the dynamic of your physical consciousness, because a child could die of a broken heart, that will protect that child throughout a lifetime, and protect that child and protect that adult by creating a belief that protects them from that dynamic. Whether that is a belief that it's not safe to love, whether you're not good enough, any of the dynamics that exists on a personal basis that keeps one from believing that one is enough. Now, to add a complication to the dynamic, not only are you involved in a dynamic of having chosen a lifetime and therefore having chosen certain things that one wishes to experience in a lifetime, not only are you creating your reality 100%, but you are also involved in a great dance of co-creation with each other, with Mother Earth, and with the divine, however you choose to define that. That could be a song, right? Define the divine.
All right.
When you define the all right. We'll stop that. All right. So understand that in many ways that you have been through a dynamic, and if you can please, if there is nothing else that you gain from these talks and these understandings, is the ability to begin to forgive yourself. You know, so many of you have chosen difficult rows to hoe in life. Many of you have chosen mountains to climb within the dynamics of an incarnation in order to be able to grow. And that comes from a dynamic of an over-exuberance and naivete that comes from a, what shall we say, an experience between physical lifetimes. For it is the dynamics between physical lifetimes that one makes the choices with one's soul of what one wishes to experience. Now also understand that the added complexity to the dynamic is, and here's where the duality comes into it, you are also aligning that dynamic with the movement of the entire species, with the growth of your entire species. It's that great dance of co-creation that we talk about. You cannot escape either one. You are involved in the dynamics of each one. Now, most of you spend all of your time focused on your own stuff and focused on your own dynamic, but we would suggest to you that your own beliefs and judgments reflect out and come back to you in your reality in many different ways. We would suggest to you that there is a constant language going on between you and your soul, a language of reflection. We spoke a bit about that dynamic, and we're not going to go into great detail around the dynamic in these shows, but there is a great deal of complexity and subtlety and grace and elegance and understanding within the dynamics of mastering this emotional situation. And for it is fired by the emotions, as is everything. So, you are involved in that dynamic of creation for your personal being, for your personal self, but again, there is that dynamic that is completely in line with the things that you are challenging yourself to face. We would suggest to you that your entire species is challenging itself to face. And these dynamics, you know, if you can begin to understand the patterning of history, for history is important when understanding experience. If you understand experience, you make choices that are more mature. If you make choices that are more mature, you become peacemakers and problem solvers. If you begin to make those movements in that direction, everything begins to change. If you start making movements based upon the dynamics of connection and compassion primarily for yourself, and cooperation, then you will begin to create a whole new reality based upon a whole new paradigm of enough. Because that's what we have been speaking about, is understanding that you are already enough. You're already reality creators. All right? Now you may have to change the lenses that you create through because the old lenses do not work any longer. But that's simply a matter of changing beliefs.
Well, it's sort of like outgrowing clothing as you're growing that no longer fits a child that's 12 years
Right,
old.
or in your case, around the dynamics of the adolescence of the species, we would suggest it's like wearing out a pair of shoes and wearing it, what shall we say, perhaps 2 years beyond its normal useful life. So, if we're going to use an analogy, let's use the good ones. All right.
All right.
All right. Excuse us. So, let us continue. This great dance of co-creation, if you can begin to remove negative ego, remove the dynamic of forgetfulness. Your society is accused so often of having no long-term memory, and we would suggest to you if you just watch or MSM. Yeah, we didn't wish to say that out loud. If you just watch MSM, then you might believe that. But in fact, we would suggest to you that reality is many-layered and multicolored, and if you can step back from the whole dynamic and realize that there is a cacophony of messages coming at you from the reflections of your reality. And these dynamics, back in the early days when we worked with people, there was an aspect of us that would work through this one that was named Ezekiel. And Ezekiel would present a dynamic that had to do more with the personal, energetic dynamic. Mm-hmm. You know what we're getting at?
Ezekiel's wheel.
Yes. We're getting at a dynamic of what we we called at that time Ezekiel's wheel. And if you can almost imagine that you are in a movie and you are looking at the reality of now, is a reality where you are looking at a pane, a frame of your movie, of your life in any given moment. Now that's moving, right? But each time, you often will come to emotional challenges, things in your life. Let's say, for example, that you have a belief that it's not safe to love. Well, that would suggest that you came into the reality, into this incarnation, wishing to learn about love. Because if you're going to really wish to learn about love, you're going to create a reality where that love is taken away, snatched away, abandoned, betrayed, whatever the dynamic early on, therefore setting that template, emotional template for you to always be longing for more love and yet always banging into pieces of self around the belief of it being safe to love because you would believe that it's not safe to love. Mm-hmm. And so belief creates behavior that reinforces belief, and so one must change the underlying beliefs and make it safe for oneself in order to achieve those dynamics. One must, in many ways, if you're coming from a place of not enough, then you're here to learn a lesson. But if you're already coming from a place of enough, then you're just here to have fun.
Whole different paradigm.
Well, and again, we just suggest that to you as a possibility of different choices that may be made in a given lifetime. So understand you're on a path that you have chosen, and it is up to your soul, that part of you that is most divinely connected and yet is the one that is most challenging. For soul has to give you those opportunities that you wish to learn in a given lifetime, even if you realize that, oh no, I don't really wish to do that from this physical perspective. Why? Because you forget. Okay? Is that kind of like a collective dynamic of personal negative ego coming in? Yes. Why? Because what are one of the signs? Two things about negative ego. First is, it's always telling you a lie. What's the other, Adrian?
It's telling you about yourself or someone else.
What else, Adrian?
It's telling you a lie. It's telling you about yourself.
See, this is a prime example of negative ego.
It
makes
just
you
slipped
forget.
in. Forget.
It makes you forget. Why is it that so many forget the dynamic of history, even recent history? It's because of the dynamic of collective negative ego. And you can represent that dynamic. You can personify that dynamic in any way that you wish. But and there are so many ways, you know, everything from evil to
a particular person.
fill in the blank yourself. All right. All right. All right. So what we are telling you is that this dynamic of Ezekiel's wheel presents a dynamic of your life is almost like a circular dynamic. Okay? And so let's just say you have the belief that it's not safe to love, so your soul presents you with the opportunity to have more love in your life. The challenge, right? And because you have not enough cowardice, or you do not have enough courage, and because you are any number of reasons or any number of excuses that you may use, you may decide and send that wheel a spinning. Mm-hmm. All right. The problem is in these circumstances, and you don't realize it, if you do not give your soul the opportunity to experience this, then the next time it comes around on the wheel, it's going to speak to you a little louder. Mm-hmm. And if you let that go, then the next time you're going to experience, it's going to be even louder and louder and louder. And some people have been known to perish by never dealing with those things that they came here to deal with. Now, that does not mean you won't have another opportunity. You, of course, will. But the same thing occurs within the dynamics of the species. And how far back do you wish to go? You know, you can go all the way back to the dynamics of the separation, to the dynamics of the separation from the collective consciousness to the individual consciousness, and the dynamics of fear that brought, and the reactions to fear that created wars, that created the belief that there's not enough, that you have to fight with each other for scarce resources, the belief that some people, some humans are better than others, the whole dynamic of class warfare, the whole dynamic of separation of people. And I again understand something, dear ones. It was only an incremental journey toward individuation. So if you look at it with compassion, if you look at it with understanding, you can look back and say, tisk, 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 but also to have the understanding that each of the dynamics of conflict, each of those dynamics has moved you forward. Each of the dynamics of that Ezekiel wheel presenting itself has been asking you the same question over and over again. Century after century, millennium after millennium. Who is it that you are going to be? And if we were just to take recent human history from the time of, let us say, the 1930s, in American history and in international history, the dynamics of the conflicts, the dynamics of movement, the dynamics of individuation. Because America at that time was not a very individuated country.
In the 30s.
In the 30s.
All right.
It was poor, but it was still very much an agri-economy. And people were connected through family, large families, and through farming, and through trading, and through connecting with others. And as time moved on, you began to there was the Industrial Revolution, and people began to be more systematized and locked into jobs. And again, there was the dynamic of better than, less than, the whole dynamic of the rich against everyone else. And that belief has carried forward even further. And then you had World War II and the dynamics of that. And we're not even going to talk to about the dynamics, but we're talking about the mass trauma that came to America, because America was naive, because you can only really have that sort of trauma. The rug can be pulled out from you only if you are naive.
You're referring to Pearl Harbor.
We're talking about all of World War II, actually. And so America thought that it was good, and we're not going to make judgments or assessments on any of it, because death is death, killing is killing, and horrible things happened on all sides. But the dynamic of the, you know, when masses of people leave all at once, they're saying something to you. And it would behoove you to pay attention to those things that are being said. And all this time you were moving more and more into the dynamic of individuation. You believed that you defeated Germany and you won World War II, and you had developed this huge machine to win the war and to do all that, and you managed to do it, and the dynamics of manifestation were incredible. And you won, and the dynamics of moving forward leads to a dynamic that often occurs. Have you ever noticed that in your personal life, when you heal something and you move on, often within a very short time, your reality offers you the opportunity to do the same old thing?
Yes.
You know, that's called the cosmic "Are you sure?" And it's kind of, your subconscious is, and this applies to the subconscious of the species as well, that the dynamic ultimately becomes when you make that step forward. Because oftentimes you have given so many ambiguous messages in the past, your subconscious doesn't really know whether you're serious this time, and so it has to present you with the same old dynamic in order to ask you if you are sure you wish to change it. And if your habits change, if your actions change, at that point, in fact, what happens is you create a new neural pathways within the dynamic of self, and new neural pathways in the dynamics of the possibility of existence. And we're going to skip a little bit, because something happened on December 31st, 1999, January 1st, 2000, that had never happened on your planet before. And if you remember what was going on at that time, there was this whole situation about Y2K. There was all this fear built up around the change in the millennium. And yet at the same time, people were getting together and preparing for celebrations. And when Y2K did not manifest, all that was left was a celebration. And because of technology, that dynamic of celebration was being broadcast from time zone to time zone. It began out in the mid-Pacific, in a little island that wished to be first in the change of the millennium, and the celebration was all based upon brotherhood and sisterhood and the oneness of all humanity. And that dynamic built from time zone to time zone, all the way across the planet. All the way across the planet. And for the first time, a wave of unconditional love had been generated from the heart and connection of humanity that swept the entire world. It was a huge step forward in human experience. It was a huge step forward in human growth. What do you think the "Are you sure?" was? We are SOTU. And we love you all so very, very much. And we will explore that and answer those questions in our next show. And so until then, we love you. And we will close, sending you peace, sending you happiness, sending you joy.
So come to our website where you can find SOTU's weekly messages called SOTUesdays, which are also on YouTube, and also our schedule for our once a month Live with SOTU Unfiltered, and of course past episodes from this show here at CTSB. Thank you again to CTSB. And with that, we will see you next time, and we'll dive off this cliffhanger that SOTU has left us with. Until then, we'll see you.
You may say I'm a dream.